What is song without night? Where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at a rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence grow, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tea, snow and blossoms, all fade. Joy must sing in the night, to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, nightingale.
I'd like to welcome you all to Sunday service at Ananda. My name is Ananta. This is my wife, Maria. We're very glad you can join us. We want to especially congratulate the graduates of yoga teachers training at the Expanding Light and the other programs and all of the guests visiting. So thank you very much for being here and joining us. We're looking for seats for special people. Okay. I'd like to read from Rays of the One Light, parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, with commentaries based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Today's reading is Faith is a call to prayer, prayer is a call to faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapters 7 and 21, we read, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Verily I say unto you, if you have faith and doubt not, if ye shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive." Paramahansa Yogananda showed by his own example that prayer is a power, provided we believe deeply in that power. When our thoughts and feelings are strongly focused and then united in growing awareness to the divine presence within, they can bring even seemingly unrealistic wishes to fulfillment. When Paramahansa Yogananda was in charge of his school in Ranchi, India, he took the boys on occasional outings to the surrounding countryside. There was a waterfall not far away, he told Swami Kriyananda, where I took them sometimes. It was dangerous to cross there, but I would cry out to the boys, "Do you believe in God?" "Yes," they would shout back enthusiastically. And so we always crossed in safety. Years later, after I'd gone to America, one of the teachers tried to do the same thing, but he lacked spiritual power. One of the boys slipped on a rock and was drowned. Thus, the Master explained, belief alone is not enough. It must be united to one-pointed awareness, which leads to self-realization. The Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter underscores the necessity for such one-pointed concentration. Whenever the mind, fickle and restless, wanders off from its concentration, let the meditating yogi withdraw it resolutely, spurning every distraction, no matter how alluring, and bring it back again and again under the control of the self. Thus, through the Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
I'd like to read from Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. Demand that God respond. Today, Father, thou hast come into my temple. With thy coming, all the lights of my sense servants have sprung to life, and the door of my heart has been opened wide. Thy blessing has driven away the darkness of ages, sending its heavy vapors fleeing at the first glimpse of thy approach. The loud beating drums of my craving announced thy manifestation. The incense of devotion, rising from the incenser of my soul, wafts upward to thee. O bless me always. Respond to me whenever I call to thee. Standing right in front of him. Oh yeah, it's fine. It just feels funny. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's a joy to be here. I was recalling a nature program that Ananta and I saw sometime recently, and there was pictured there these little ducklings. They were wood ducks, and they were, actually they weren't pictured yet. They were high in this tree, probably a couple stories or so off the ground, in this little round hole, this little cavity. And it was their day to set out into the world. And Mom came to the edge of the little hole and jumped, and her wings being such as they were, she floated down fairly gently to the ground. And afterwards came these little ones. There were 6 of them or so. And there they were, right on the edge, one after another. They went down, but without those developed wings, it was kind of a and then they went off into this new adventure, this new world. But I was thinking of that, and we could look at it anthropomorphically and think, wow, these little ones had such faith in their mother. And but it wasn't faith. It's blind instinct. And those of you who have pets are probably about ready to charge at me, but blind instinct, not faith here. And Master said, God sleeps in the rocks and minerals, dreams in the plants, stirs in the animals, and starts to emerge into that wakeful state, ultimately fully becoming awake in humankind. And so it is not until we are incarnated within these bodies, within the human body, the human form, that we can hold the consciousness even of belief, what to speak of faith. Yogananda said that faith is itself self-realization. Faith is itself realization. And so to even possess the littlest bit of faith is a state of relative realization. I was reading recently in its entirety, and what a joy to have the time to do that, The New Path by Swami Kriyananda. And to read this story, it's the story of us all in one way or another, but to read about his quest, his search, and the sheer struggle of it all until he came onto the path, the confusion, the sense of not belonging, of incarnating in a foreign land, in a foreign world, and never quite feeling at home, and just not yet knowing what, on a certain level, there must be to know, but you're so far from it, and the world is so unfamiliar that you keep asking, what does it all mean? What am I doing here? And just to read that account, and as he starts to emerge from that, he talks about how luck plays into it. He realizes that it's just, if you're going to be here, let's be positive. Let's hold that positive outlook. Let's think about things happening rightly, happening appropriately. And he starts to play with that thought of luck. And if I think myself lucky, I will be lucky. And he starts to discover the power of affirmation. But he can only take it so far. And he's thinking, he knows that wisdom is all important, that there is some great knowledge out there. Maybe if I just think wisdom, I'll have wisdom. But that, too, is not quite enough. Within his being on the deepest level, he realizes that he doesn't yet have that complete picture, that solid faith in all that is, in whatever is. And so he said, in our faith, we must not extend it so far beyond our present realities that it becomes presumption. Because with presumption comes tension. With tension comes ego. And that story that is recalled in the rays there, of this Indian teacher, going out there and just calling on the words of Yogananda. He did it, I can do it. But that's not enough. It has to be our own. It has to become our own fully. Yogananda, when he was in India one time, he went out on the Bay of Bengal, where the Ganges comes out and meets there with the sea. I haven't been there, but I'm told, it's said, that it's a very holy place there. It's a pilgrimage spot out there in the water where these two energies meet. And he went out there with a number of other people on the boat. And at a certain point, way out there, land was far enough away to not see it at all, barely be able to see it. And the boat started to take on water. And he was there with a lot of other people, and he was dressed in his orange robes. No one particularly noticed. India's full of swamis and of relative enlightenment, and no one took notice until this point when water started to come on the boat. And all of a sudden they were very interested in this swami. Swami, save us, save us. Water is filling up the boat. We're going to drown out here. Save us. Only you can save us. And Master stood there silently, and then he said, sit down. Bring your hands together. Close your eyes. Call to God. Pray to God. Only God. It's all God's will. Only God can respond to our need. And they did just that. They didn't have a lot of time, so they were deliberate and they were intense and fully in that prayer, fully in that moment. And the boat started to gently rise up. It didn't sink. They were okay, and their lives were saved. But he drew to our attention the importance of making it our own. Prayer must become our own and be bathed in that communion with God. And in that realization, faith starts to develop. I was many years ago, my mother has since passed away, but the last few years of her life, for a period there, not the whole time, I went down with a lot of frequency. And this one time I arrived, and she was staying in a home. She needed a certain amount of care. And the administrator asked me to come in, and I came into her office, and she said, we can't have your mother here anymore. And I just was totally bewildered. This was going to be the fourth move. And because the condition kept changing, and I just said, what can I do? Where do I go? It wasn't where I grew up. I wasn't familiar with the place. I was unhappy with where she was, but at least she was somewhere. And I just said, what am I supposed to do? And she gave me about 4 pages of a list of places, and this is all I can offer you. Take this list and just go look and see how these places feel to you. Well, I was, this was down in Southern California, and I had about 24 hours. And I just, how can I possibly do this? And I left there in a tizzy. I was just so disheartened, and went out to get lunch for my mother and myself. And I was returning back, and I was at the stoplight. It was a LA, really long stoplights. Otherwise, don't do this. I was looking through the list. And I just said, Master, how am I going to do this? The names, they looked institutional. They looked stuffy. They looked so unattractive. I started to read down them, and just how am I going to know which one is the right thing? I want to do the right thing, not what I want. I want to do the right thing for my mother. And this voice just said, just read the list. It's there. You'll see it. I just thought, and I just start down, and I got it. The one I got to, the 4 seasons, it just, I don't know, it struck me, loving nature. I don't know what it was, but it was the only one that had any life in it, the 4 seasons. So I thought, okay, I'll go there. I'm going to go to this place. And I go there, and it's just this little house in a residential area. It's a 6-7 bedroom home. And outdoors was this paved walkway, and it just went through gardens, fruit trees, flowers everywhere, just spilling onto the path from all sides. It was a place where I could, spend time and really be with my mother and have her in a place of beauty. And it was such a powerful teaching to me in that moment, because it was it was just, it was insurmountable, seemingly. It was something how could I pick this out myself? And prayer brings us to that place. It may be a desperate situation. It's a need of some kind. It's a desire to just not waste this incarnation, for heaven's sakes. We've come onto the spiritual path, and to be able to really use it and use it dynamically and not waste time. So whatever the prayer is in that way. When Master, he prayed with such intensity, and Swamiji said it was never until he really met Master that he understood the power of faith, the power of seeing that faith manifest on a daily basis, miracle after miracle. He said up to that time he used to mock even the miracles in the Bible. It's hard to believe them. I mean, you read these accounts and mountains cast into the sea and this, that, and the other. What sense does that make to the mind identified with the self, the ego? And so Master taught us to pray with that intensity and that focus of concentration. One time it was when he was coming to this country, and his guru had sanctioned the visit, but still he wanted more proof, more assurance. He didn't care in India and America. It didn't matter to him, but he wanted to do God's will. That was all important. That was singular. And so he went to sit to meditate, and he said he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed, and he cried, and he sobbed, and hours went by, the greater part of the day, because it was a genuine concern in him. He said, any Oriental teacher who would dare the Western airs is going to have to contend with far more than the snows of the Himalayas. And he knew that, he hadn't been to America yet. People of spiritual bent spoke of the West as materialistic, as very worldly. And so it was a concern, not so much on a personal, not on a personal egoic level, but a concern because his life was God, is God. And to do God's will was all important. So with such intensity he prayed. He said, I prayed so long and so deep that I felt my head was going to burst apart if I prayed any longer. But still he kept at it. And then he heard a knock at the door, and he opened it. His little meditation room, he opened it up, and there stood Babaji. It was his first meeting with Babaji in that way. And Babaji said, you are the one whom your guru asked me to send to you, that you might go to the West and take these teachings. So very, very powerful moment. And those moments come to us, as I read from Whispers, to when we seek that response from God, and we seek it for the highest reason, not likes and dislikes, not what I want to do, what I think should happen, not even what I think my intuition, says should happen, but really, truly, what God wants in my life. When Ananta and I don't tell this very often, so I asked his permission. But when we felt we wanted to get married. And this caused a little bit of a rumble in the community at the time. And rightly so, because we had, and we do now, we're so dedicated to this path and to our spiritual life. And so we have concern for one another. And that's where advice comes from here. It comes from the deepest concern that we live our spiritual life in the way that we know each of us wants to. And so we decided to get married, and a little bit of a ruffle there. And we decided to ask Swamiji. And Swamiji had been out on tour for weeks at this time, and he was going to be out for weeks more. And we were impatient to just settle this thing once and for all. And so we went down to the phone, the only phone in the community. It was down at the market, and we're up there in the dark and at the phone, and we just couldn't get through. This went on for, I think, 2 or 3 days. And every time we called, it seemed, we tried to think of the most logical time to get through, but he was never there, or he was talking to someone, or would be back just in a few minutes or a short amount of time. And so this went on. And this one night we were down there, at the phone, and it was cold, and it was winter time, and it was dark, and we were phoning. We tried a couple times, hadn't gotten through. And we thought, well, let's just try once more. It was 3 hours ahead of our time. It was approaching midnight, and which is a little late, but he hadn't been home. And we just thought, we looked at each other and said, why aren't we getting through? Why can't we make this call? And simultaneously, we both said, well, if Swamiji says no, what are we going to do with that? And instantly, we both knew that, well, if Swamiji says no, then we're not going to go forward with this. That's it. So that's it. And for us, again, it was just that desire, to try to do God's will in this. And probably one of the biggest steps, we've taken in our lives. And once we decided that, we picked up the phone and dialed, and we got through. And we asked Swamiji, we told him what we thought. He asked us our feelings very briefly, very succinct conversation. And then he just went on, he blessed us and then just went on to something else. And there it was. But it was perhaps, I think, the most powerful teaching we've probably ever nearly had in that. Certainly our first really powerful teaching in that, and really opening to God's will. And being willing to do something different to which normally so much feeling, so much personal desire is wrapped around. Swamiji said if we want to develop dynamic faith, that it's not enough to merely believe in that higher power, that we must not only make it our own, but we must offer ourselves to be an instrument of that power and live that power, live that faith daily, moment by moment. My grandmother, toward the end of her life, she lived with us for 15 years, and she was bedridden. She had broken both hips, was unable to walk, and she lived in a house separate from our house, just out across the patio and yard. And I used to go out there oftentimes and take her breakfast. She had master's books. At the least, she was a student of master's. No one ever knew whether she was a disciple, not even my mother. But she had many of master's books. Her scientific healing affirmations, they were all little checks in the right-hand margin by her favorites or the ones that were relevant. But she lived such a dynamic faith of health. And it was a living, vibrant energy and consciousness every day, such that in her mind it was a matter of hours, it was a matter of days or weeks she was going to walk again. It was just a given. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't just a fleeting notion. It was a reality. It was a truth in her. And you could see that. She just lived in that consciousness of perfect health. And isn't that where, if we get sick or we have some disease, some trial or test besets us, it's not about conquering the outward part of it. It's about conquering the inner part of it. That's realization. That's faith. And to have that consciousness of health and totality in God, that's worth everything. The body is worth nothing by comparison. Most of you know Vairagi, who passed away a few years ago, and we knew her from the day we came to this community. So Anant and I came up to say our goodbyes as it came kind of close to that time. And we had just gotten the mandir in Sacramento at that time. And she said, tell me everything. I want to hear everything about it. And very frail. She was very frail at that point. In my mind, strikingly beautiful. And she sat there in her bed, and we told her about it. And she said, I want to get something. We said, no, don't get up. We'll get it for you. And she said, no, I want to get something. And so very slowly, she got up, went over to the dresser, opened it up, and took out some money. She said, I don't have very much, and I don't need it, obviously. And I want you to have this for Master's work in Sacramento. And so in that spirit, we accepted that. We spent a little more time with her, and then we got up to leave and said our goodbyes, went out the door, had just walked through the courtyard, and we're going to round the gate, and we heard this voice in back of us, and we turned around, and she had gotten up again and come to the door, was leaning up against the door, and just had her arm raised and was vigorously waving it. I love you, I love you, I love you. Just all this energy and presence. It had nothing to do with a body or an illness or impending death or doom or any of that. It was just this soul exuding the joy of living a life for God and being victorious in that. Very beautiful. When in this reading, Swamiji cites this excerpt from the Bible. We don't see people casting mountains into the sea, but mountains of delusion, yes. Yes, great mountains of delusion our faith allows us to cast aside once and for all. And it shall be done, and it is ours. It is ours in faith.
The green star.